So today we are continuing our Thriving as an Empath series, and our topic today is releasing the Messiah complex. And this is a really big deal because humans are naturally empathic. Some people are more empathic than others. It's like some people are better runners and some people are better at memorizing things. Some people are much more in tune with their emotional connection with others. I actually believe that some of us, it's actually part of our soul's journey to empathically connect with others. And other people, it's still naturally there, but it's not meant to be a focus. And one of the challenges is when, especially if you feel that real wiring, that this is really part of your journey, I'm meant to connect with others in this way. It can, if we have this Messiah complex, and what the Messiah complex is it means that you believe that on some level you're here to save others. You're here to save the world. You're here to save the people around you, your partner, your children, your parents, your clients, the community, whatever that is, that's the Messiah complex. And if we have this, then we will end up using this natural empathic gift, and we will become so hyper-focused on others, it will become imbalanced. We'll actually lose ourself, we'll lose our own center, and our lives will be completely poured into the journeys of other people. We'll completely lose our way. We won't be able to hear our own truth. And the other problem with the Messiah complex is it's a complex. It's a thought process. It's a program in our brain, or maybe in our interface. Maybe it's a way of interacting with an insane world that I'm just going to focus on fixing it. You know, that's what I'm going to spend my entire life, just fixing this crazy world, and it's just part of my interface. It's how I survive. But because it's part of the interface, or it's part of our brain, we now start confusing this natural empathic flow of emotional connection with mental stories. And as soon as we start mixing mental stories with emotions, the emotions become something they're not. Right? It's one thing to be sad. We can feel sadness, and this is fine. Right? It's good to be sad. It's good to feel. That's what we're here for. Humans are meant to feel emotions. So it's good to be sad. And we're fine with it until the brain kicks in and says, you'll never find another one like them. Life is like, as soon as the brain starts kicking in and twisting the emotions, it starts a loop. And all of a sudden, sadness becomes a way of life. Sadness then suddenly becomes part of our philosophy. Or anger. It's good to be angry. But if our brain gets in there and says, yeah, they always do this. You know what? Men always do this. You know what? This is just what women are like. You know what? That's what relationships are. You know what? That's what just the way life is. And you know what? The world's just crazy. And I just, and you have this, now anger has this structure that it's now looping on. And it all comes out of the brain. It's not meant to loop. We're meant to experience it, take action, and go on to the next one. That's what we're meant to do. So anything that involves the brain and our emotions, we have to be very careful because it'll warp and twist our emotional responses into something they're not. It'll make them bigger than they are. It'll make them smaller than they are. But it'll twist them. And the Messiah complex, and I mean a complex, it is something that our emotions will get twisted on, and we are the ones that get destroyed, not the people we're trying to save. They may become annoyed with us and stop wanting to hang out with us and stop wanting to listen to our constant advice and constant belief that we can save them, and they just are too much of a loser or something. And I know that sounds really harsh, but that's what it feels like. If someone comes up to you and they say, here, I'll do this, and we don't say, I'm going to save you. But here, I've got this thing that will help you here, 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 here. Personally, I avoid people like that like crazy. Because I'm like, I don't know who you think you are. Like there's something inside of me that just sort of goes, yeah, I'm kind of on my own path here, kind of sorting stuff out. If I want help, trust me, I'll ask. But someone who just assumes that they know something more than I because they observed something simple on the surface and then made some big thing to make themselves feel good about themselves. And so realize I have this sort of like, pushback because I've had the Messiah complex for most of my life. And I don't know whether it's because I was born to preachers and teachers, like everybody down my line were ministers, school teachers, whatever. Like I am born into this, I am here to educate you. I am here to save your souls. Like it's like, I don't know, maybe it's part of my ancestral, I don't know, something. So I know this very intimately. And so I am quite opinionated about it because it was really hard to get out of it. And I still have to be very careful that I still don't do it. You know, it's easy to do in a relationship. It's easy to do in the community. Even me running for council, right? I'm running for town council right now. Am I doing it to save the town? Am I doing it to save the people? Really, Katrina? One, I'm not here to save anybody. Two, who do I think I am? Right? There's all these thousands of people in the town, all living their own very interesting lives with their own soul's journeys and their own karma and their own samskaras that they're playing out. You know, so I have to constantly check myself to say, why are you doing this? You know, in my astrology grid, I have all these planets in the house of service. So I have a tendency to always want to do things to help. And it's not that you never help anymore. This is the sort of challenge of this whole Messiah complex idea. It isn't that we don't help. It isn't that we don't teach yoga, or we don't work in the healing field, or we don't share ideas, or we don't write books, or we don't help our neighbors. We do all that. The question is, why are we doing it? And if we're doing it because we believe that we're here to save others, that's a twist. It's a twist in the natural desire to do things, you know, for the collective. You know, so if you imagine that we are on some level in some dimensions, we are all one. We truly are. So if I can alleviate any struggle for you, then we lift the whole. But I'm not saving you. I just see that you've got 10 bags of groceries you're carrying and I have one. Here, let me carry some of your groceries for you. Okay, I'm not saving you. It's just, it was an opportunity to help, or an opportunity to be a part of, or an opportunity to spread the load. Like, this is very, very different than, wow, I'll bet you're going to have a good day now because you just met a good Samaritan. And did you see that thing I did for you? That guy, he's going to be thinking about that all day. And again, it's not that it's so obvious that we think about it like that, but there's a whisper of it inside. You know, there's a whisper of it that says, you know, I'm doing this for your benefit. And it's a real danger. So back in the day in 1999, when I was sick and I had breast lumps, I always repeat that because I know you guys have heard all this story a million times, but some people haven't. You know, I worked with a man named Jim. He was an amazing person. And even he wouldn't have called himself a healer, even though that was the role he played for me in that time. He would never called himself that. He just simply saw things that other people didn't see. And if we were open to hearing them, he would share them. You know, it's interesting. So today, 23 years later, he doesn't work with people anymore. because none. He says, because everyone literally wants me to act as this healer, to save them, to fix them. And it's like they don't want to do anything themselves. And he's like, what am I doing then? And philosophically for him, he's like, I'm taking away your journey. Why are we even here? Why, as souls, are each one of us even here on earth? If we each have a journey to take, let's say we do have karmic patterns that our soul wants to work out. It wants to get through this. It wants to understand. It wants to get down to the root, take it out and heal it and actually walk forward in new patterns. Why would we take that away from someone? You know what I mean? Like, why would you interrupt someone's life path? If someone is here to learn something, explore something, the best thing we can ever do is actually do the work, right? If I want to learn how to climb mountains, it's really important that I train. And it's really important maybe that I practice doing rock wall climbing in my local community. And maybe it's important that I work out, and it's important that I build those muscles. It's like that story of the person who wanted to save the butterfly because he saw the larva kind of struggling, to get out of the chrysalis or something, right? And he thought, oh, well, the butterfly is really struggling. So he very carefully opened it up and allowed the butterfly to come out. And of course the butterfly died because the wrestling to get out of the chrysalis is what builds the muscles or builds the infrastructure inside the butterfly so it can fly. So it's a very curious philosophy to say, I'm going to let you skip some steps, and then for us to believe that then you can now do what you were made to do. It makes us start to question, do we believe that there's design in our lives? Do we believe that our souls actually have a mission? Or do we believe we're just sort of, meat suits walking around suffering, and hopefully I can relieve your suffering? Or do we believe that each one of us is actually this divine being having an experience? And maybe from the outside, your story looks horrible and I wouldn't want to have it. Maybe. But that's just my judgment. It's just a story. It has no bearing on whether or not it's the right path or anything like that. When I even think back to all the years on the farm that I really struggled. They were really difficult years. Last night I was teaching yoga and we were talking about, my world is really, really busy. It's very rich. I love it. I'm writing and I'm teaching and I just do a million things, right? And I love it. It just excites me. I kind of sometimes feel like that mad scientist in the lab. It's why right now I couldn't live with anybody. I just couldn't have a romantic partner living with me because I would be too antisocial to be able to still do all the things I love to do. And we were talking about this at yoga last night, and I realized, because there was a woman there that had young children, like a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old. And all of a sudden this realization hit me because I had a lot of depression when my kids were little. I just felt like a horrible mom because I was really resenting them. And it wasn't until last night that I realized that was one of the reasons, was because I actually love having this multifaceted creative flow in my life. And suddenly having babies on a farm, and my son colicked, and it was really, really labor intensive. I deeply grieved the woman that I love to be in order to be a mom. And I had real depression, real struggles. But that was important. That was an important part of my life. Nobody could have ever healed me or fixed that. It was very important to my journey. It made me who I am today. So it's a very funny philosophy. So for Jim, he's really of the philosophy that, if you really want help and you really want a different way of seeing the world, he can share how he sees the world. And if that resonates with you and his presence seems to be authentic, then you'll walk away imagining something different about the world. He didn't heal you. He didn't fix you. You just observed him in his life, in his presence, in his philosophy, in his way of being, right? But he didn't fix you or anything. Because I think we do that all the time. We look at people and we see them as, I want to be like you. You know, maybe I want to emulate Gandhi, or I want to emulate this person, or I want to emulate, Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, these are kind of lofty goals, but there's something about these characters that resonate in our heart and says, oh, I like that. And it wakes us up to something. They're not saving us. They're just passionately pursuing whatever it is that they believe in. It's a very different thing. So one time, after I was sick, so that I had this miraculous healing, the lumps came right out the side of my breast. It's in my book, What If You Could Skip the Cancer, if you've never read it. And I called him one day and I said, Jim, I want to do what you do. I want you to teach me, or would you teach me how you heal people? And with a pile of explicatives, he says, why the frick would you ever want to do that, Katrina? That's the stupidest thing I've heard. He just gave me hell. And I was like, what? Again, daughter of preachers, teachers, isn't this the most altruistic thing? What are you talking about? Why would that be a bad thing to want to heal people, to be a healer, to help alleviate people's suffering? How in the world can this be the wrong thing? And he just said, Katrina, I want you to go away and think about why you'd ever want to do something like this. And I really had to, he had me stumped. I had no idea why I wouldn't want to do that. It just didn't make any sense to me. It was the ideal thing. And then in prayer and meditation and, I don't know, sobriety or something, I kind of thought about it, and I realized I was uncomfortable with other people's unhappiness. I was uncomfortable with other people's discomfort and other people's pain. And I wanted to fix it. And it kind of comes back to that philosophy thing, right? It's but is there purpose in people's struggle? And again, don't get me wrong. If someone says, hey, can you give me a hand? Sure, right? That's a whole different thing. I'm helping because you asked. That's not me going, I can see where you could use some help. And even then, there are times that we can do that. Sometimes people are kind of drowning. I've had friends, especially in those early years when my kids were young, I really was drowning. I was really in a horrible, depressed place. And I would have friends that would come over and they would just sort of look at me and say, wow, you're really hurting. And they would say, you know what, let me give you a hand. And I would literally sit there while they clean my kitchen because I was really, really struggling. And they were just being kind. They weren't saving me. They were just genuinely, their hearts were just kind of, wow, I really want to help here. And they did. And I fully appreciated it. And then I started to cry and I'd start to talk about whatever was going on while they kind of washed the dishes and played with the kids or changed the diapers or whatever, So this isn't a black and white thing. We just have to look inside ourselves to see where we might be amok. Philosophically, there's another question that if we believe that our life is here, that the purpose of my life is to save others, we have to ask ourselves, what is my actual soul's journey myself? What am I expanding into? What is my growth edge? Not fixing others. What is my personal soul's edge? Because that's one thing I realized in myself is that I thought I thought I had made it. I thought I was at the top of my game. I thought I was as good as I was going to get. that there was nothing else for me to learn. I know it sounds so conceited to say it out loud. So I thought, well, obviously I'm just meant to share this now with others. It was like there was this glass ceiling over my head that said, no, this is the height of your personal growth. And so the idea that I wasn't supposed to be fixing other people meant, so then I'm supposed to keep growing myself. And this was a real challenge because I don't know why. I just had this idea that I'd hit my top game, but I hadn't. So I had to actually deeply go within and say, no, what do you want to learn about, Katrina? What do you love to do? What's your growth edge? What do you want to expand into? What are the things that maybe you long ago gave up, but you don't believe you could ever do, but maybe you could? Or maybe there's parts of me that I struggle with. So I've avoided those things. Maybe I love being in my head, but I'm not really much into the fitness of my body, or vice versa. Right? Are there things that I'm not doing because it's too hard? And so because those are too hard, I've sort of hit a ceiling. So I'm just going to go fix everybody else. And this is what happens when we have this wounded healer archetype. That I'm actually quite struggling in some difficult areas of my life, and I don't know what to do with them, and I feel very stuck. But I have this really cool modality, so I'm going to go out and I'm going to fix everybody else. And the funny thing about that is, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, right? I'm not saying that going out and sharing whatever you've learned with others is a bad thing. The key, again, is the mentality. Are you doing this to fix those other people? Or do we recognize that the people that come to me for help are actually here to guide me on my journey? Right? If you pay attention, their problems will be similar to yours. And you'll actually realize that they're actually giving us clues to help us unpack the things that we've struggled with or we're currently struggling with. It's this idea that we really all are in this together. There is no hierarchy that I'm more enlightened than you are, or I'm more connected to God, or I'm a great healer and you're suffering. There isn't this weird grade. I'm not a grade A human and you're a grade D human, and so therefore I can fix you because I know better. There's no such thing. And this is a huge ego thing in the spiritual community, in the healing community. And it's not just in here, it's in medicine. It's like, it's easy to kind of point fingers at doctors, oh, they're playing God and blah, blah, blah. But it's something weird inside of us. It's like we all want to play God. Whether we're a doctor or a naturopath or a Reiki master or a spiritual teacher. Like we all want to kind of play God all the time. Like it's a massive ego trip. And for me anyway, I know that the medicine for me is to go inside and figure out, what do I want to learn? What do I want to grow through? What is it? Because I'll tell you, it's so easy to think. It's like one time I went to Sedona. And Sedona, Arizona is beautiful in the States. It's quite a vortex of energy. It's quite a place. And I met a lot of really nice people there. But there was a funny energy, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and it really bothered me. It really curled my spine, and obviously maybe it's a mirror, maybe it's my own stuff. And I was doing a lot of talks with people, right? Because people had asked me to do talks about Tantra and different things. And there was a couple talks of groups of people that, I don't know, I couldn't reach them. I don't know, it was almost like I was just sort of talking into a void. It was very strange. And afterwards, I sat with one of the women of this one group in particular, and I said, that was really strange. I said, I loved talking and sharing and chit-chatting, and I love that. Like, it's just, and normally I can really feel the room, and it becomes a very, in Dutch you would say gezellig, like it's a very warm, fuzzy, sharing of experiences. It's not like I am the teacher and it's a gathering, right? It'd just be the same as if all of us were actually in a room. It would be a really interesting, juicy sharing of ideas. And that's normally what it was, but it wasn't with this group. I felt like I was just talking into this void. The woman looked at me and she said, yes, well, you have to understand that Sedona attracts a lot of spiritual graduates. We don't really have much left to learn. And it was so enlightening for me to hear her say that. One, I realized how much I disagreed with her, but it also really clarified that for me, that if we live in a limited world, right? If you're just, let's say a limited world, like learning to drive a car. Learning to drive a car is quite limited. You can sort of learn the basics, make it second nature, and maybe you can learn to drive really fast, or maybe you can learn to drive in snow and ice. But for all intents and purposes, it's a limited skill set. But in the spiritual world, which is our life, which is the human existence, we live in an infinite space. How do you ever graduate in an infinite space? Why would we ever believe that we were limited in our growth? Right? It's not possible. The only reason that I would be limited in my growth is because I lack the imagination to imagine what else is possible. Right? Or maybe I don't want to. Maybe I'm still attached to being the healer, being the fixer, being the Messiah. Maybe I have karma around that, right? Maybe I need to work out this complex that I need to be better than other people, or I need to have the answers that other people don't have, or maybe it helps feed my self-worth or something. I don't know. And so I need to actually do this. This is important. It's an important thing. And it's not time to move on to the next thing, because this is still a wound that needs to be looked at. I don't know. So it's just always interesting, because I love the analogy of humans, that we are climbing our own mountain. That I am climbing my mountain. What is it that Katrina would love to expand? What would I love to explore in this world, in this consciousness? Well, you're on your mountain and you're climbing your mountain, and it's different than mine. It's not my mountain. I actually don't know how you should climb your mountain. You have a very unique path to take. And you might look over at me and you might say, Katrina, I got this thing over here that I have to do, and it looks like you did it once. How did you do that? And I might say, well, I kind of did it like this. I don't know if it'll work for you, but this is sort of what worked for me. Oh, that's cool. And then maybe there's another time that they're doing something and I'm like, hey, what are you doing over there? Because it looks like I need that. Like it's always a helpful thing, because we don't really know each other's terrain. And so I'm always intrigued. And that's how I felt myself. I felt that it's like I was standing on the edge of my own mountain, looking around at the other mountain, people on the mountain. It was like I had my back to my own mountain. And I was looking out at the other people on their mountains saying, you should do this. You should do this. Hey, you should turn left. Hey, you should, right? Instead of looking at my own mountain. It's just really interesting. And and we all can do that, right? When we're struggling, we can turn around and we can say, hey, can I get some help? And we can ask for help. And then people who say are great naturopaths or chiropractors or Reiki masters or doctors or homeopaths or counselors, and they actually genuinely love doing this. They love the human body. They love how it works. They love the Sherlock Holmes of sorting out how they can possibly help. We can say, hey, I twisted my ankle, or I fell off a horse. Can you kind of get my spine back in alignment? Sure, I'd love to do that. And you pay them and everything is exchanged. No one saved anybody. It's the same thing as, me going to a blacksmith and having my horse's shoes made. He didn't save the horse, he just made shoes for the horse. So it's a really subtle shift into what do I love to do, doing it, and perhaps it's of great service to others if they need it. Then I'm doing this to save the world. Like, you can feel the difference, right? It's also a really interesting realization when you look at how people really heal. So let's say, we're here. Let's just say I'm giving a talk and you guys are here. Well, I'm just talking about something I'm interested in and I'd like to explore more and I'd like to go deeper into it. The healing happens in between everything I say. It's like your soul has a question and it's asking a question and it's listening. But sometimes it's not even what's said. It might be something that I said that then triggered someone else's thought, and then someone else had this idea, and then this, and all of a sudden this starts to triangulate inside of you, and all of a sudden you're like, aha, that makes sense. Who knows who said what? Who knows who initiated it? Who knows who, right? Who even knows why I'm doing these talks? Maybe this talk came out of someone's question from 3 months ago, and then a conversation happened there, and it was like, aha, this is an interesting thing. Let's dive into it, right? It's who knows? Like, there's no one saving anybody. And what's crazy, this is why we read books, why we listen to podcasts, why we hang out with people who are interesting to us and insightful. And it isn't what they say. It's like this interesting container to explore thoughts and allow the pieces to fit inside of us before we go, got it. But we do it. You do it, right? We do it. It helps us on our journey up the mountain. And it's really important that we are all empowered in that way. That it's us that take the steps. Nobody else does it for us. Like one time, I was teaching a yoga teacher training 10 years ago. And it was all in person, obviously. When you would have 10 full weekends in a row, that would be the 200 hours. And it was like the Saturday. So it would normally be like Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. So at the end of Saturday, one of the women came up to me and she said, Katrina, I can't make it tomorrow because I've got these tickets to Iron Maiden concert. She just went into this whole story about this Iron Maiden concert and this and that, and she just sort of kept telling me all the reasons why she wouldn't be able to come to the training on the Sunday. And I just sort of sat there listening. And I didn't remember this. It was my sister who was taking the training who told me this story later. And I was just sitting there listening. And I said, okay, cool. I'll see you next month. And that was it. That was all I said. So we came back the next month. And, of course, we're doing our check-in. Everyone's checking in, And we got to her and she says, Katrina, what you said to me just blew my mind. Like, I thought about it all month. And I was like sitting there thinking, what in the world did I say? And then it wasn't until later that my sister came up to me and she said, you didn't say anything. I was there. And I was like, oh, good, because I forget a lot of things I say. But I swear this is what happens more often than not. It's like I was doing nothing but listening. I wasn't even holding space. I wasn't being some teacher. I was just sitting there. I literally was no different than anybody in the world, just sitting and listening to someone. And this is where, like, even the act of listening is so valuable. People go away going, wow, that was so profound. But it was their own thoughts that they were hearing. It was their own realizations that they were hearing out loud that was so powerful. Another thing that's really interesting about this idea of raising our own vibration or healing the world. A while ago we did a whole series on the levels of consciousness in David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force. And if you didn't hear any of them, it's really interesting because David Hawkins looked at all the the levels of consciousness that we often live in, that we often get stuck in. It's one thing to be angry because something happened. It's another thing to live in a state of anger. It's another thing to grieve because we've lost something or someone. It's another thing to live in a state of grief. And so each one of these levels have a certain vibration. And if we get stuck there, we sort of perceive the world through this level, this vibration, this frequency. And at the bottom, it's like shame, guilt, anger, fear, grief. I don't remember what they are now anymore. But it comes all the way up to courage. And courage is at this level of 200, of 10 to the 200. And at that point, our frequency starts to become very positive and proactive. And now we can actually make choices in our life. And we're not just sort of circling the drain and just sort of struggling, right? We're actually, okay, now I can do stuff. And then beyond that, it's neutrality, willingness, love, enlightenment, what have you. And one of the interesting things that he said was that when we raise our own frequency, like when we do our work, our personal journey, when we climb our mountain and really clear up our karmic patterns and our samskaras and all these things, and samskaras are just like patterns from past lives and stuff. But however you understand that. When we do that, we slowly raise our own frequency. Even if it's just a few points, we just keep raising our frequency. And his theory was that as we raise our frequency, the whole ocean rises, right? It isn't just that we're rising like a silo, because we are connected to everyone. But we don't raise the frequencies of others by telling them things or by grabbing them or injecting them with our energy or something like that. It's just by osmosis. As we rise, everyone around us rises too. And even then, I'm still feeling this is a little bit Messiah-like what I'm saying. But the point is that there's real value in climbing our own mountain. And there's a greater value to the whole when we continue, that we get rid of that glass ceiling and we continue to grow ourselves. And that was a huge deal for me because sometimes, and again, I don't know whether it was just weird programming as a child or the ancestors, that it was almost selfish. I believed it was selfish to do my own thing. That I was supposed to be out there helping others. You're supposed to be selfless. Your whole life is supposed to be devoted to saving the world. Like, this is a huge teaching. It's a huge teaching in religions and organized religion. And, to spend your whole life focusing on yourself and your own journey and your own passions, that this is selfish. So this idea, this teaching from David Hawkins really alleviated that for me. That no, it's a good thing. It's a good thing for you to explore your joy and your passion and what your edge is. The other thing that's really interesting in my experience is that, like, I love writing books and I love talking and I love giving courses and gathering and chatting with people about deep and interesting things. I really love that. But the minute I think that I'm doing it for anyone else, it becomes flat. I've written books. I could pick a chapter out of any book I've written and we could just talk about it. But that's not my current growth edge. I wouldn't be doing that for me. That doesn't expand me at all. I'm just repeating something I've taught so often I finally wrote it down. That's not interesting. And even I'm writing this book, The Union of the Masculine and Feminine. If I write it with the mentality that I already know everything that's going to go into this book, it becomes a very boring book. And there's no life in it. Like, is that really what I was born here to do? Just write down stuff? Is that really it? Am I not growing right now? Am I not expanding right now? But when I sit down and I actually write and I'm actually exploring it, and I'm diving into the ideas and the philosophies, and I'm playing with it, and as I'm writing it, it's actually forming itself as I'm writing it. Like, it's so funny, like there were a few little holes in it, in the intimacy parts that I was struggling with, the masculine and feminine. So of course, my partner and I, on the weekend, we end up having these deep conversations about intimacy and the masculine holding and the feminine chaos and all that. It was really deep, and it was coming directly out of the experiences we were having. And he was asking me, like, is this how you're feeling? And so we end up diving deep into this. If I go into this with this idea that I already know it all, we're not going to go anywhere, because I didn't know it all. And we kept going deeper and deeper, and I had this great realization that then I was like, oh, I have to go write. And it's really exciting that even this book is at my personal growth edge. It's personally something I'm exploring right now as well. And it's so exciting. Like, suddenly the whole book becomes alive to me. It doesn't just become this thing that I'm just documenting, right? For the sake of others, because others need to know this. You know what I mean? Like, it's so egotistical. But it's actually something that I'm personally so passionate about. Just so passionate about. And it's fun to live like that. And I don't know, it kind of sucks the joy out of it as soon as we think we're doing it for other people. At least anything I do, I find that teaching, even doing one-on-one counseling or grid readings or anything, it has to be a back and forth. It has to be a connection of souls. I don't know anything better than anyone else, right? So thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful day.